achievements or not. I want to say something that I heard from people in Israel and people in Europe, that one of the differences when you encounter someone in Israel and when you encounter someone in Europe, that's the way it used to be. Maybe today they became Americanized. They will want to know who you are, what you are, and you would speak about the character of the person. Here in the United States, the first question is who you are, and second question is what do you do? Sometimes they'll ask where you're from. But what's most important is what do you do? Because you're defined by your occupation. You're defined by your specialty. You're defined by what you accomplish. So it means that here in the United States, we value things based on our identity as who we are. So if we're a physician, we identify ourselves, okay, we're a good doctor. If we're an accountant, we identify ourselves as a good accountant. So we're going to read a secular piece before we go into the Hasidic thought, just as a little introduction of the way psychology sees it. So if you turn to page 158, text 1. So it's written by a PhD. It says, think about the first time you realized you mattered. What happened? How did you feel? Chances are your moment of mattering impacted and moved you. And this is an important line. Most likely, you felt important because someone else said so. Someone else said so, or someone else said something about what you did. So in other words, you feel good because somebody complimented you or somebody pointed out one of your virtues. Feeling significant is a basic human desire and a critical factor for mental, emotional, and physical well-being in life, school, at work. So what is mattering? Why is mattering important? And how can we learn to create the experience of mattering for others? Researchers find mattering is the feeling that we're a significant part of the world around us. It's the belief that we're noticed, important, and needed right now. While studies show experiencing mattering increases a sense of self-worth and motivation, research also finds it reduces the risk of severe depression, anxiety, and can save lives. So mattering is very important. But the question is, let's talk about this. Matter to whom? To whom do you matter? And the second question is, do you matter because of what? So there's always this competition between a married person and a single person, because the married person is flying to Australia. It's a true story. And he lands at the airport, and he came from the States. It's a long flight. And what does he do the first moment? He calls his wife, says, I arrived, the flight was safe. Next to him is a single guy and says, that shows how tethered you are. I'm free. I don't have to worry about calling anyone else. So to him, he quipped, that means you don't matter to anyone. The fact that I have to call someone means I matter to someone. So this is the question of mattering to whom? And then mattering because of what? Is the mattering because we feel that others like us, or is it an intrinsic value? The difference is, if we matter because of something that we did, then it's external. It's not who we are. It's just what we did. But if we matter because it's an intrinsic value, then it's a categorical value. It's not something which is a value based on someone else's judgment. So we're going to talk a little bit about this and what the Jewish view of it is, and actually get into it a little deeper and see how the Talmud and how Hasidus explains it. We're going to have some interesting readings here from Rabbi Shneur Zalman of Liadi as well, and from the Rebbe, but we're going to start in a minute with the Gemara. So the question that we have here is, are we worthy or not? So the answer is, I'll give you the heads up. In Judaism, a true value is not an earned value. I'm talking about value of who you are. I'm talking about value of a deed. But a true value is not what you did or you earned. It's categorical. What does it mean, categorical? It's the way you were born. Because when you have a categorical value, you can't lose it. It's part of who you are. And even if somebody falls, and even if somebody doesn't conduct themselves properly, that value is still there. And we're going to give a look at this. There's something which people talk about, which is called self-esteem. If you give a look in the in on the screen, what does self-esteem mean? I have a good self-esteem of myself, but self-esteem usually is dependent on how I compare myself to other people. I'm healthier than other people. I am smarter than other people. I contribute more than other people. I'm more successful. So it's all a comparative kind of value. But that is not an intrinsic value. That's a value, which is a value that comes as a result of the environment, but it's not a value that's really intrinsic with you. It's not part of who you are. Um, Psychologists like to speak about something else which is called self-compassion. But self-compassion is a word which psychologists say we don't use it in Hasidus. We only use it in Hasidus in a certain way, and that is the previous Rebbe once, the Rebbe would quote it many times, when somebody came into the Rebbe for a personal audience, and he complained about himself and felt very negative about himself, the Rebbe said, just as you're not supposed to speak evil about someone else, you're not supposed to speak evil about yourself, right? So self-compassion is not what it is, but the self-worth of our intrinsic value, where does it come from? And how do we get that? So this is something which we can discuss before we go into the Talmud. But the truth of the matter is, I will reveal to you that in Kabbalah and in Hasidus, the way it sees Judaism, it's a non-issue. Why is that a non-issue? So in order to get to there, we'll have to understand it. Actually, everything that we've learned in the last 5 weeks will actually shed light on that and explain why our value is an intrinsic value and it's not a generated value. Can anyone take a stab at that and explain why you think it's so? Anyone want to take a guess? What?
Every person.
Okay, how Judaism values life. What does it mean how Judaism values life? The most important thing is what?
Is life.
Okay, but animals also have life. Are you going to compare our value to the value of an animal? What? The decisions we make is not an intrinsic value.
Rabbi,
Yes.
I was going to say, I have a friend who has 2 daughters, and one is handicapped and one is not, and they both matter. And it's not about who can accomplish what in life. The handicapped daughter is limited, but she matters just as much as the non-handicapped daughter.
Absolutely. And that's exactly what we want to establish. We want to establish that that's the accomplishments in your occupation is not what defines your value. Your value is an intrinsic value. But we want to put a label on it to be able to understand exactly what you said. Why is it when somebody is limited, they're considered to be just as equal? They have the same value as everyone else. So in order to understand it, we're going to come from a twist. And the twist is we're going to read a story in the Talmud, which on the surface is a jarring story. It's a very disturbing story. It's something that does not make sense. To give you the introduction, the Zohar was written by one of the greatest rabbis that lived in the time of the Mishnah. His name was Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. Now, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai was not afraid to speak his mouth and to say what he really believes. And it got the Romans very angry. And the Romans issued a decree of death against him because they felt that he insulted the Romans. So he went and hid in a cave for 12 years up in the Galilee of Israel. Whom did he take? He took his son, Rabbi Lazar. And they studied Kabbalah, they studied Talmud, they studied Mishnah for 12 years straight. They survived on carob. There was a carob tree that grew outside the cave, and on spring water. Could you imagine eating that for a week? They ate it for 12 years and they survived. And when they came out, Rabbi Lazar was so fixated on the divine and godliness that he couldn't tolerate people spending time in their fields. So Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai said, "I have to take you back for another year to get accustomed to the world." So we're talking about someone that was very spiritual and very godly. So the Gemara tells us a very strange story. And I want you to also understand, and we talked about this many times, the Talmud didn't just record every conversation that the sages had, because the Talmud took 400 years to write. So it was redacted and written and rewritten, and only those arguments or discussions or laws or stories that were relevant for all the future years were put into the Talmud. So here you have a story from the Talmud that does not make sense whatsoever. So please open up to page 160, text 2. Once Rabbi Lazar, the son of Rabbi Shimon, right? We talked about Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, the son of Rabbi Lazar, was returning from Migdal Gador, from the home of his teacher. I don't know where Migdal Gador is. I know that they have some place called in Israel Tel Gador, which is right next to Hadera. It's at the beach. Could be it was from there, but it's a place in Israel. That's where his teacher was. Riding along the riverbank on his donkey, he was feeling proud and content. He had just completed a significant stretch of Torah study. Along the way, he encountered a man who was unusually unattractive. That's a very kind translation of the way it says in the Talmud. And that man greeted the rabbi respectfully and said, "Peace unto you, my master." But Rav Eliezer did not return the greeting. Instead, he said, "Worthless man, how ugly you are. Are all the people of your town as hideous as you?" That's the thing that's jarring. How would a rabbi say that and say that he was ugly? We'll explain that soon, but this is the way it appears in the Talmud. But what's most important is the response of the man. The man replied, "I don't know, but you should go to the craftsman who made me and tell him, how ugly is the vessel you have formed." So what he was basically saying, I'm a creation of God. And if I'm a creation of God, that defines me. And that's my value. So if you think that I am ugly, or if you think that I am unworthy, then it's not a reflection on me, it's a reflection on my maker. Well, Rabbi Lazar realized that he sinned, and he realized how wrong he was. So he immediately slipped off the donkey, bowed before the man, and he said, "You've spoken rightly. I admit my mistake. Please forgive me." The story goes on to say that he went to the city and he asked for forgiveness. He didn't want to forgive. That's not the point. Okay, let's talk about this a little bit. Actually, the Rebbe talks about this at great length, and it's already printed in one of the Rebbe's volumes of Likkutei Sichos. And the Rebbe, it's actually volume 15 for anyone that wants to look it up. And the Rebbe speaks about that Rabbi Azar, when he looked at a person, he didn't notice his physical attributes because he was so removed from physical that the physical was meaningless to him. But when he looked at the man, he saw that the man had no values as far as spirituality or godliness, that he was at the lowest of the low. And that's why he called him an empty vessel. He said, he said a worthless man. And he was judging him based on what kind of value? An earned value. He was judging him based on a value that he should have earned. And that was his mistake. And the man set him right. And the man said, "But you haven't seen the intrinsic value. And the intrinsic value is that I'm a creation from God. So even though I fell, but nevertheless, I'm a creation of God." The Rebbe points out that truly deep inside, the man had a soul. As we're soon going to see, the idea of being created in the image of God. And it might have been dormant, but the statement that Rabbi Lazar said to him awoke that spark in him, and therefore he immediately connected with God. So what are we talking about over here? Why is the Talmud telling the story? The Talmud is not telling the story to embarrass Rabbi Lazar. The Talmud is telling the story that the response from the man taught Rabbi Lazar a lesson, and it should teach us a lesson. That our values don't come from anything we've done, That's not our true value. That's an added value. That's not our essence. Our true value is because God made us with intent and purpose. And that is the answer I was looking for when I asked you before, after all the 5 lessons that we've had, if we ask ourselves the question, why do we matter? We matter because God created us. We matter because God created us to be his agent in the world, and that nothing is by chance, and we have so much to accomplish. And even if we don't accomplish it, we still have that within us because we have the potential to do it. To give you an example, if somebody sends a letter to a soldier out in the field with with life-saving information that he needs, and the letter is in the post office and it's not yet being delivered, does the letter not have a value? It has a tremendous value, whether it's used or not. It just hasn't reached its potential until it reaches the soldier and the soldier reads it. The same thing as if you have a key that's sitting somewhere in your desk drawer and you haven't looked at it for years, but it can unlock the chest that has gold and silver or secrets. So the key has a value whether you use it or not, right? The same thing is true with anything that you create. Let's say NASA creates a new satellite, but they haven't yet sent it off into outer space. It already has a value, even though it hasn't reached its potential. The value is not judged by what it has done. The value is judged of why it was created for and what its purpose is. And this is what we talk about when we talk about the human being, of our own value. And that's what we were trying to say in all these lessons, that we have this amazing value, that this value is there because God created us. Okay, so this is step 1. Now we're going to go to step 2. So if you give a look in text 3, this is taken from the Mishnah in Pirkei Avot, which is called Ethics of Our Fathers. Rabbi Akiva makes a statement. But I want you to read the statement very carefully, because a lot of people get lost in the statement and they don't realize that there's 2 parts to the statement. You ready? Page 161, text 3. Rabbi Akiva says, human beings are beloved because they were created in the image of God. That's statement number 1. Statement number 2 is they're even more beloved because God let them know that they were created in his image. As it says, in the image of God, he made the human being. So what's he saying over here? Let's talk about the first thing. What does it mean, created in the image of God? That the human being has a value because we were created in the image of God. The only creature that was created in the image of God is the human being, right? No one else was created in the image of God. Question that I have is, God has no image. And if God has no image, what does it mean that we were created in the image of God? Not only that, the Torah warns us that we're not allowed to make an image of God. Because when we make an image of God, we are applying God to some sort of fantasy that we have that God looks like, and that smacks of idol worship. So if God has no image, and as it says so clearly in the 10 Commandments, what does it mean, B'Tselem Elokim, that in the image of God we were made, or in the form of God we were made? So if you look at the screen, you will see actually 3 images here. But I'm going to start from the image on the right, not go left to right, but go right to left. So the image on the right, you have a circle on the top and you have a circle on the bottom. Can anyone tell me, it's probably easier when you look at the circle on the bottom, what it's referencing?
The spheroids, the 10 spheroids.
The 10 sphirot, right? It's referencing the 10 sphirot. What are the 10 sphirot?
The intellectual and the 7 emotional.
Well, we first have to explain what it is. So, God is infinite and God is unlimited. And God wanted to create a finite world. And in order to create a finite world, he allowed the divine light to be condensed and to be able to project itself in the world in 10 orderly faculties. There's, if you count up, you will see 10. There's a right column, a left column, and a center column. Now, this concept of Sfirot was already introduced many, many years ago in Kabbalah. And when we studied original Kabbalah, we actually touched upon this. But what I'm trying to say here is the following. When you list the 10 Sfirot, you really see them as 10 human attributes. So let's take the first one, which Larry mentioned as intellectual. The 3 intellectual attributes that we're talking about is Chachma Bina Das, wisdom, understanding, and knowledge. That's where the word Chabad comes from. So a human being is created in such a way that the top of the chain in his life is his intelligence, right? Is our intelligence. That's why the head is on top, right? An animal walks on all 4, and the head is at the same level as the heart, right? Furthermore, not now. Furthermore, the furry friend that Westerners love is a dog, right? What is the Hebrew word for dog? Kelev. What does Kelev stand for? Did everyone said it by a Fabrengen? Kelev is kulo lev. It's only emotions. There's no intellect in a dog. It's just emotions. The human being, we stand erect that the head is on top. Why? Because the moach, the mind, has to control the rest of our body. So the most important part in a human being is the brain, right? The brain is made up of 3 components, which are the first 3 sfirot. And then you have the emotional sfirot, and then you have the bottom one, which is malchut. Keep that in mind. Malchut is kingship, which is also likened to speech and to action. That is something which is very important when we talk about the 19th of Kislev, which we started talking about before, and we'll explain that a little bit later. So let's remove it right now. So what we learn in Kabbalah is that the reason that the human being is structured in such a way that we're made up of these 10 faculties is because we're a reflection of the divine light that shines just like that in the 10 faculties. So that is one example of where we're created in the image of God. We're creating the image of God that there's the 10 faculties, and it starts with the intellect, it goes with the emotion, then it goes to the action, and many other examples. That's one thing. Second is the middle one. The middle one is 2-directional. That's talking about choice. An animal doesn't have a choice. An animal acts either instinctively or impulsively. But a human being, and even all the decisions that they make, is based on impulse and based on instinct. We told you the story of Rabbi Yonasan Eipshitz when he was invited to the performance of the cat handing out the goblets of wine, and he had a little mouse in his little case, and the cat left everything go and went after it. A human being can make choices, right? Where's the ability of the human being? Where's that ability come from that the human being can make a choice from right to left or left to right? Because we're creating the image of God, because God also has choice. And finally, the left side, it doesn't mean left or right, but this is something which is going back to what we're talking about, and that's the power of the brain. The power of the brain is so strong because the brain controls everything. The brain is the main essence of the human body. The brain controls how you react to pain. The brain controls how you react to circumstances. The brain controls how you act in general. The brain is like the cockpit of the human body. And God made it the same thing, that the brain is the wisdom of God that controls everything. And where is that wisdom found? The wisdom is found in the Torah. That's one of the reasons that the Torah is so important, because as the Alter Rebbe, Rabbi Shneur Zalman, writes in Tanya, that he and his wisdom are one. That's why when you study Torah, you form a bond with God, because the wisdom is in the essence of God. Now, having said that, we're going to come to another thing. I'm going to ask you a question. If you were going to ask God to write a resume and fill in the resume, what would he write in the resume that would make him fantastic? I want to hear an answer from you guys. Wake up. Everybody is shy. Crowd, everybody that's listening in, come up with an answer. What would God write? What's his greatness? Would he write about his great accomplishments? What would God write?
He's always with us.
God would write, he's always with us.
Well, he,
I'm not saying he's not, but is that the greatness of God? What else would you say about God that's so great?
He's infinite.
God is infinite. Okay. Well, that's an answer, but we're soon gonna tackle that as well. What else are you gonna say? He's both infinite and finite. He transcends both. But notice, nobody said that he would write, I'm the creator of the heaven and earth. Why wouldn't we write that? So let's see what the hero of today writes in one of his Sforim Likutei Torah. So if you open up to page 162, we're going to read a piece of Likutei Torah. I'm going to read it in English, but if you read the Hebrew, it's fine to read it in Hebrew. I'll just read one thing. And to answer your question, God's essence, please look inside, God's essence and being is not defined by the worlds in any way, not even as one who transcends and fills them. Transcends is the infinite light. It's called in the vernacular of Hasidus Sovev Kol Almin, that it hovers above the worlds because it can't be internalized in the world, or Memala Kol Almin, which is the lower level of the divine, which is the Shekhinah, that actually can fill the world. God is not defined by any of that. For the essence of godliness is not that the world were created by him or received their lives for him. As it's written in the Siddur, you are the same before the world was created and after it was created, completely unchanged. In other words, what the Alter Rebbe is saying, had he not created the worlds, it would have made no difference to him whatsoever. So if you say that God is the creator of the heaven and earth as a praise, you're actually minimizing God. Why are you minimizing God? Because you're putting God into a category that the value of God is something that he has done. God is way beyond that. The reason that God is because God is what God is. And it's not only infinite and finite. To answer someone that just mentioned before that God is infinite, we are not permitted to say that God is infinite because infinite is also a defined value. And you can't define any value on God. God is beyond values. So if God wants to express himself in the infinite, he chooses to express himself in the infinite. If he chooses to express himself in the finite, he does it in the finite. If he wants to combine the two, he can combine the two. It's irrelevant. So the essence of God is not by what he does. The essence of God is by what he is. There's a concept that is brought down in Maimonides, and the Rebbe would mention it very much. The Barbanel talks a lot about it, and it's called Mechuyav HaMetziut. Mechuyav HaMetziut means a mandatory existence. God's existence is not an existence that came about because of something else. God's existence is not by accident. God's existence is a mandatory existence that it couldn't be otherwise, that God should not exist. That's the kind of existence it is. It's not an existence that our mind can even understand or fathom. And the Rambam writes about this in the beginning of the Mishnah Torah, that these are things that the human mind cannot truly absorb. So the point of the matter is that when you say God, it's beyond any kind of description. But you're not going to define God. You're going to praise God for the good things that he does, but you don't define God by the things that he does because it's beyond him. If you take a great mathematician like Einstein and you say that he knows 1 + 1 is 2, that's the greatness of Einstein. That's actually minimizing Einstein. The same thing is true if you say a great physician knows how to put a Band-Aid on a patient. That's minimizing the great physician. The same thing is true in every profession. Why? Because the greatness is not defined by how we see it. The greatness is defined by the essence of Hashem is. Why is this so important? Because if we're created in the image of God, it doesn't only mean partially, it means this part as well. Our greatness of who we are, which is because we were created in the image of God, is not defined by what we're doing. It can't be defined by an action. Just as God is not defined by an action, we're not defined by an action. We're defined by the fact that we are created in the image of God. And that is what Rabbi Akiva is trying to say. Beloved is the human being because the human being was created in the image of God. What's even greater is that God revealed it to us that we should know that we were created in the image of God. That's because of God's kindness to us. So now we understand that statement, what it says, Chaviv Adam, that so beloved is the person that he was created in the image of God. So now when you talk about life, you're not just talking about what life matters. As soon as a child is born, that means that there is a likeness of God, a light of God that came into the world. So whether the person is smart or not, or whether the person accomplishes or not, the fact that they matter is because they were already created. And one of the famous Kabbalistic scholars actually explains it if you give a look on page 163, text 5. And he says the following: human beings are beloved, even more beloved. Every thinking person must take this to heart. Rabbi Akiva did not mention these expressions of love just to praise humanity, but to awaken a person, to help them recognize that they are a significant being in the eyes of the one who spoke and brought the world into existence. In other words, in the eyes of God. For this reason, one must be especially careful to protect their own dignity, for that dignity is the dignity of their Creator, who formed them in his image and likeness. To degrade oneself is to degrade him, to degrade God. You know, there's an interesting law in the Torah that if somebody was given the death penalty by hanging, that you're not allowed to let them be overnight on the gallows. And the reason it is because it desecrates the image of God. So even though there was only way to redeem his soul was through death, but you can't bring indignity to him because it brings no dignity to the human, to God. Which means to say that when a human being has dignity, the dignity is because I'm a representation of the divine spark in this world. So even it gives me a responsibility. Therefore, I have to do all the things. I have to find my mission. I have to find my purpose, as we're going to see a little bit later, the way it's illustrated. But nevertheless, if we say that God's value is independent, the same thing is true with ours. And here we find another thing. Every creature that was born, that was created by God, was created as a couple. The only one that was created as a single, because the couple was silent, because Adam and Eve were created as one human being, back to back. And the surgery only happened later. So the Talmud asks, why was the person created as a single? Let's give a look. Page 164. Lefichach nivra adam yechidi. Why was the person created as a single? Why was the Adam created as a single person? Every individual is required to say the world was created just for me. Now, what does that mean? Because we've talked about this before. Bishvili nivra ha'olam, that for my purpose, the world was created. On the surface, it sounds very chauvinistic. It sounds very pompous and haughty. And actually, there are people that think that way. They think that everything in the world is there to serve them. But that's not what the meaning over here is. Because if the world is God-centric, which means that the center of life is God, means to say that your purpose that you were created for is God-centric as well. So it's not about us being the center of the world. It means that God is the center of the world, and God chose humans to be able to. God created humans, that humans should be that. We talked, I want to just go over a little bit more about that. I just want to explain something a little bit more over here. And that is that when we talk about connecting heaven and earth, so the heaven is spiritual godliness and the earth is earthliness. And it's very hard to see a connection between the two. Now, animals, they might be spiritual, but they can't connect heaven and earth. An animal might appreciate music. An animal might appreciate good food. An animal might appreciate life. But you can't give a theology lesson to an animal. It's not possible. An animal can't understand it. An animal can't understand that there's something beyond their needs and their life. But a human has that ability to do that. So God created the human in the mission for the mission to be able to connect heaven and earth, to be able to be that ladder that connects the two and make the world a dwelling place. And that is accomplished by God making us in his image. So the first thing that we've already accomplished through this whole 5.5 lessons is to understand you matter, each and every one of you, because you were created for a mission. But not only that, you were created in the image of God. And therefore, when you see another human being, you have to see the godliness in the other human being. And if you can't see the godliness in the other human being, then there's a risk in yourself, just like Rabbi Lazar, because Rabbi Lazar was judging the person on their acquired value rather than intrinsic value. And in the acquired value, he saw that the person was an empty vessel. But if he would have thought about the intrinsic value, he would have never said it. And the man had to bring him back to his senses to say, go to the one that created me. Now, this concept of humanity is true everywhere. It's true with the animal soul. It's true with all of humanity. But then there's something which is very unique with the Jewish people, because we find that by the Jewish people that they're called children of God. And I want to preface this. We're going back to the 19th of Kislev. You know that the Alter Rebbe, I'm going to stop here to tell a little bit the story of Yutas Kislev so you'll understand why I'm bringing out this whole concept. We call him the Alter Rebbe, means the old Rebbe, Rabbi Shneir Zalman of Liadi. So he already had published some of his writings, and one of it was the Tanya. The people that had gone to the Tsar to say negative things about him, and with that to cause him to be arrested, were people that were Jewish and they were Orthodox, but they were unscrupulous people, and they felt that he was a challenge to their life. And it was political power. You know, always there's politics and stuff like that. So what they did was they did two things. Number one, they said that he's collecting money for Israel. There was an organization that's still in existence. It's called Kolel Chabad, which they support the poor in Israel. And Rabbi Shneir Zalman V'Adi wrote numerous letters to his followers all over Russia and Ukraine and all the whole area saying, even though you don't have much, but the people in Israel have less. So let's send charity to them. And that's how he supported them, because they had no money whatsoever. So the blood libel against Rabbi Shneir Zalman V'Adi was that he was supporting an enemy government, because Israel was under the Turkish Ottoman Empire, and Turkey was in a state of war with Israel, with Russia. However, it never went to the government. It went directly to the poor. The second thing that they said is the following. When we talked about the 10 Sfirot, the lowest of the Sfirot is Malchut. Malchut is kingship. Why is it called the lowest? Because a king is a head and shoulders above everybody else. The act of being king is the lowest part of how he communicates with outside. But nevertheless, Malchut is rooted in the crown, which is the highest. So they took his writings and they quoted where it says, Malchus lesla megarmo klum. Malchus has nothing in it, to say that he's speaking against the Russian Tsar and the Russian royalty, that he's dismissing the kingdom and he wants to try his own kingdom. So based on that, they arrested him. And they took him with a black wagon, which is a sign of treason. And they took him to the Peter Paul prison in Petersburg, Russia. And he was held in solitary confinement for 3 weeks. And then he was put into another cell. But at the same time, the intelligent officers in the government were intrigued by the fact that they had such a personality. So they began to study his writings. And when they were studying his writings, they realized there was such depth there that they were enamored with it. And they actually came to visit him in his cell to discuss it. There's many stories of how they came to ask him questions. And they were very, very impressed, super impressed. They saw right away that the charges were false. They saw right away that he was a holy man. And he had no aspirations of being king or taking over the Tsar or anything like that. But the way the system is that they would have to ask a bunch of questions. They had a whole bunch of judges sitting by a panel table, and they let him in that he should face them. Now, when he walked in, he turned to the right, circumvented the center of the floor, and then he came straight to the judges' panel. They asked him why, and what the trick was that they had a false floor there. And what they would do is they would have the inmate that would come in for interrogation step on it, and he would fall a few feet, and that would disorient him. And then all the answers that he prepared would fly out of his head. And then they would pick him up, and then they would ask him whatever they want, and they figured he'll tell the truth. But the Alter Rebbe circumvented it. So they asked him 22 questions. 20 of the questions he answered right away in a very eloquent way, and they were very impressed. One, he smiled. And the last one, he said, that's too complex to give orally, but he's going to write a thesis once he's released, which he did. Now, what was the 21st question? The 21st question was a quotation from the Tanya that we're soon going to read, where he writes, the second soul of Israel is part of, in other words, the Jewish people is part of God himself. And he also said over there that a lot of things that the heathens do, they do only for their self-aggrandization. And he smiled. We'll explain soon why he smiled, and they didn't bother him. So let's give a look, based with that introduction, to text 7. The same Rabbi Akiva continues on. After speaking about all of humanity being beloved, he says the following. Beloved are the Jewish people, for they are called the children of God. As he in the Hebrew, it says, Banim lamakom. And even greater love was shown in that it was made known to them that they're called children of God, as it says, you are the children of your God. Okay. So again, he uses the same terminology, that there was a belovedness, that they were created, as children, but there's a deeper level that they were made known of it. Now, what's the difference between this? We learned before. What's the difference between being created in the image or being called a child? Can anyone figure that out? They're both great, because all of humanity was created in the image of God. But we say something unique about the Jewish soul, as we're soon going to see what Rabbi Shneur Zalman writes in text 8. So image means a resemblance. A child is the essence. So every human being is a resemblance of God, but the difference of a child is not just a resemblance, it's the essence. Image means you have shared qualities. If it's a child, it doesn't mean you have the same qualities necessarily. You can have parents that have a certain set of qualities, and they vote Republican, and then they have a child that votes Democrat, right? Isn't that a thing that's going on? So it doesn't mean that they have, but they're still related because they share the DNA. When you have a resemblance, it's called an earned love. But when you have a child, it's an inherent love. I want to talk about this for a second because I think we mentioned this in the past. There's an interesting law in the Torah that says that if somebody breaks into your house and the sun shines and you kill him and the sun shines, then you're not guilty. What is it talking about? It's talking about that if someone feels attacked in their home and they have to defend themselves, and the only way they can defend themselves is by killing the intruder. So then if they kill the intruder, they're not guilty. But that's only if it's clear that the intruder had the intent to kill. How do you know if the intruder had the intent to kill? So it depends if it's a father and son situation, if the intruder was the son, or if the intruder was the father. So it says if the intruder was the son, it's very possible that they had the intent to kill. There was just a story in the news a few days ago where someone was found that he killed both his parents, right? However, if the intruder was the father, then it's clear that his intent was not to kill you, because a parent can't bring themselves to kill their child because there's an inherent love. And this is what he's saying over here. It's an inherent love. So the difference between an earned love and an inherent love is that it's one which is on the deeper level. Image is conditional relationship. A child is irreplaceable relationship. You can't. There was a court case that made headlines a few years ago where a child wanted to divorce their parents. I don't know if you heard about that. It was a legal case. And the question was, there could be divorce between spouses. Can there be a divorce that a child is divorcing their parents? They didn't want their parents to be responsible for that. But you will never hear a case where a parent wants to divorce a child. Because even if they say, I disown you, I don't want to give you inheritance, deep down, they are very, very sad because they want to have a relationship with their children. So it's an irreplaceable relationship. Oops. Let me go back. Okay, I guess this is it. So let's give a look how Rabbi Shneur Zalman Levi writes it. And this was the actual statement that he had to laugh about. Text 8, page 165. So he says, "V'nefesh hashenit b'Yisrael, hi chelek elikam yimal mamish." The second soul in a Jew is an actual part of godliness from above. As it says, Israel is my distinguished and illustrious child. You are children of your God. So Rabbi Shneur Zalman explains, just as a child is drawn from the parent's essence that is contained in their mind, we're talking about the seed. So too, the soul of every Jew is drawn from God's wisdom. And since God is wise, but not with you with limited wisdom, for he and his wisdom are one, the Jewish soul which stems from that wisdom is likewise one with him. What is this meaning that he and his wisdom are one? Where does it come from? It actually comes from Maimonides. Maimonides introduces a concept that when you say, what is the most famous prayer in Judaism? Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. Hear, O Israel, God our Lord is one. How do most people translate it? Most people translate it that we only have one God. Comes along the Rambam and says that there's much more to it. And it's not just that there's one God and there's no other God, but unlike everything else that's made up of multiple components, like humans are made of multiple components, God is not made up and comprised of components. God is a oneness unlike any other oneness. So if God has a faculty in him, it's not an add-on, it's part of the oneness of Hashem. So the wisdom is not something that's added to God, it's part of the oneness of Hashem. So it's united and one in essence with God. So anything that stems from that wisdom is one with God. That's why we say the Torah is one with God. And when you study Torah, Rabbi Shneur Zalman of Liadi says that there is no other unity that's greater than that because your mind is absorbing the wisdom of God, and the wisdom of God is one with God. The same thing is true about the soul. Okay, now some people will say that it's true that God and we are one, but that's only when we behave correctly. So the truth of the matter is that when you look in the Tanakh, which is the scriptures, you find that even in the days that Jews misbehaved, God said, I still love him because it's my child. As it says in Hosea, page 166, Kinar Yisrael va'aveu u'mimitzrayim karati livnim. When Israel was a child, I loved him, and I called him my son. What's the connection to Egypt? The connection to Egypt was that we say that the Jewish people at that time were at the lowest level. So much so that had God waited one extra moment, they would have fallen to the same level of the Egyptians. And even then, God loved them. So the Rebbe gives an explanation. And the Rebbe speaks about essential love. I'll just give you the example, and then we're going to read it inside. Anyone that has seen someone that has a baby, so there's a love for the baby. Now, why is there a love for the baby? Did the baby do anything for you? Did the baby make you coffee in the morning? Did the baby make you tea? Or make your grandparents tea? Or make your uncle tea? Or it was your nephew? Your nephew made you tea? So what's the love? The love is an intrinsic love. It's not a love that is logical. It's not based on anything. So here's what the Rebbe says. A father's love, this is page 167, 9b. A father's love for an older child who has developed intellect and refined character may not come solely from the fact that this is the father's child. It may also be because the child is wise, well-mannered, or respectful, and that's love rooted in reason. Remember, that's love rooted in reason. In Hebrew, it's called Ava Mitam. It's Ava Mitzadatam. There's a reason. But a father's love for a young child is different. A young child means a child that is just born. It's not about what a child does or doesn't do. It's an essential love because they are one. Father and child are of one essence. With an older child, though his essential bond remains, the love that stems from observable qualities can sometimes overshadow it. The essential love is always there, but not always on display. However, with a young child, a baby, it's just the opposite. That's why the prophet, when he's describing the love that God has for Israel, he doesn't say anything but that Nar Yisrael. What's Nar? Nar is a child. Israel is a child. I love him. I love him just like a parent or a family member loves a little baby. That's the same way I love him. Why is that? Because it's from the essence. We're getting somewhere with it. If you give a look at X10, when it's interesting that during the time that of the judges, when the Jewish people were acting against God, and many were involved in idol worship or involved in other unbecoming behavior, and they sunk to a lowest level of spiritual and moral life, the Medrash says the following. At that time, God said, my children are stubborn, but what should I do? To destroy them, that's impossible. To have them return to Egypt, that's impossible. To exchange them for another nation, I simply cannot. Which means to say, I cannot give up on them. So where are we going with this? We're going with this is that because of the spiritual soul, the divine soul, which is part of God that we have within us, the love that God, we don't only matter because we're created in the image of God, we matter because we are part of God. We're the DNA of God. We're the essence of God. So before we even do anything, we already have a mission and a purpose. Okay, is that settled? Very good. But here, there's an opposite question. What is the opposite question that you will ask? If we matter unconditionally, why try it at all? Imagine if we say that you are a part of God and you decide that your life is going to be spent in bed, drinking Coke, eating pizza, and watching television all day. Let's say you got an inheritance or you got a lottery, and now you do that. And I come along and I teach this class and I say, you matter. You're special because you create an image of God. Fine, I have it all made. Why do I have to do anything? Is that not a question? What? Okay. So over here, we're going to look at something which is called royal etiquette. Let's talk about the British royal family. I know that there are a lot of people that follow them. Americans don't understand it, but in the UK and in the countries there, they take it very seriously. And by the way, when the Tsar fell, some of the Hasidim were upset, not because he was a friend of the Jews, but because a lot of Hasidus is based on examples and metaphors of a king and his subjects, a king in the land, and you won't have that example. So we're stuck now just with the king and queen of England, whether they have power or not, but there is something there. But do you know that for the British royal family, they live by a strict code of etiquette? They don't have a rule book, but you don't have to know that. Do you know that royals must always dress formally? They can never wear t-shirts. They can never wear sweatpants unless they're all alone, but never in public. Do you know that teacups have to be held in a special way? The thumb and index finger on the handle and the pinky is curled in. Did you know that? Do you know that they're not allowed to show any public displays of affection, which we call PDA? Do you know that they're not allowed to make any political opinions? Do you know that they're not allowed to have any kind of physical contact with people, commoners beyond a handshake? But if it's a commoner, they're not allowed to kiss them. Do you know that they're not allowed to take selfies with people, with commoners? You know that you can't, even the media likes to give them nicknames, but they're not allowed to call each other by nicknames. Do you know that royal women must wear hats during the day? And what do they wear at night? A tiara. Everybody is going, what's the tiara of the princess or whatever else it is, if they're married? Why is the following, now, do you think following the rules makes them important? or because they're important, that's why they have to have these rules. Let's think about this for a second. Huh? It's practically it's both, but it's not like keep these rules and now you're important. It's on the contrary. Because you're important, you need to follow these rules. If you translate this into everything that we've been studying, because you're important and you matter and God created for a mission, you have to conduct yourself by the way you were created. You have no choice. If you don't, then you're not living up to what you really have to live up to. Now, even though there's a prince that has been actually disowned from the palace, but in the reality, he's not truly disowned from the palace. Do we need more chairs? In that room, the next room. Don't worry about it. Rabbi Cohen will help you. So the point of the matter here is that when you think about it in that way,
Royalty comes up every day.
I don't know what that means. Royalty comes up. But the point of the matter is that royalty comes up to us the moment we open up our eyes and we say Modani. The moment we breathe, we know that there's royalty, and that's why we have a mission. So the point of the matter is that I was saying that they can be disowned, but truth of the matter is that in Judaism, you can't say that because a child is irreplaceable. Now, this concept of nobility is very, very interesting because we're going to read another weird piece of the Gemara. If you open up to page 170, it's called the mitzvah of self-care. It's actually not from the Gemara, it's from the Midrash. The Midrash says that there's a verse in Proverbs that says, Gomel nafsho ish chesed. A kind person benefits their own soul. And the Midrash says, whom does it refer to? To Hillel the elder. Why? When Hillel would part ways with his students, he would continue walking with them. And once they asked him, Rebbe, where are you going? He replied to fulfill a mitzvah. What mitzvah, they asked? To bathe in the bathhouse, he said. But is that really a mitzvah they wanted allowed? He said, of course. Think about it. Statues of kings are placed in theaters and stadiums. The officials appointed to care for them wash and polish them regularly. They get paid for it, and they're honored for it. They move in circles of nobility. Now, if that's how we treat lifeless images made in honor of a human king, so much so with me, in other words, all of us, a human being was fashioned in the divine image and likeness, as it is written, for in the image of God, he made the human being. Which means to say that self-care is not only an ethic, but self-care is the idea of glorifying God. It's the idea of, I'm a messenger of God, so I have to be taken care of. I have to present myself in the right way. In other words, it's not only in spiritual matters, it's in every matter that you do. And finally, the Talmud says in 12a that it was taught a person should wash their face, hands, and feet each day in honor of their Creator. As it is written, everything God made, he made for his own sake. So we were created for the sake of God. Rashi says, furthermore, in honor of their Creator, meaning to honor the one who made them, as it says, for in the image of God, he made the human being. And when others see a beautiful person, they're inspired to say, blessed is the one who has such beauty in his world. I just want to comment about this thing about the beauty, because there's a famous video with a beauty queen from Israel. There was some sort of program where they were going to come to be named Miss something, I think Miss Universe, whatever that means. And she came to New York because the pageant was in Florida. So she came with her whole entourage to see the Rebbe when the Rebbe was giving out dollars. And she comes there and she was introduced as the Malkat HaYofi. What's Malkat HaYofi? You saw it. And the Rebbe says to her, you know that true beauty is within. And when you have true beauty within, then it's expressed on the outside, which means that if you're void of beauty in the end, the outside beauty is not there. It's ineffective. It's nothing. And the result was she burst out crying. And she immediately asked for blessings for her mother and for others. And the Rebbe said to her basically that what you do for others brings you beauty. Very interestingly enough, this happened in the late 80s or early 90s. I don't remember the exact date. But just 2-3 years ago, one of the TV stations hunted her down. She's living in Israel. And they showed her the video. And she started to cry. And she says, that changed my entire life. Because what's her life? Her life is to prepare brides of poor homes that don't have money and don't have resources, how they can present themselves at the wedding with the little that they have. And she spends all of her time doing that, teaching them how to put on makeup and how to get the dresses and how to be able to do it in the right way. And she says the only reason that she devoted her life to help others in this kind of case is because what the Rebbe told her. That is what true beauty is. So when we see this kind of beauty, it means that we thank God because it glorifies God. Furthermore, according to Judaism, there is a prohibition against damage, self-hurt, or doing anything that's going to make us not look good. So give a look. If you give a look, page 173, text 13a, this is taken from the book of Devarim. You are children of your God. Do not cut yourself a tear out here of your head for the dead. Why? Because you are a holy people to your God, and he has chosen you to be his treasured people from among all the nations on the face of the earth. And then it says, do not eat any detestable things. Do you know that in the royal palace, there are certain things that cannot be served? Do you know that oysters and shrimp cannot be served? And it's not because they keep kosher. Foods that make a mess or foods that are unbecoming cannot be served. Where does that come from? It comes because they're royal. God says to the Jewish people, you are my royalty, and therefore you cannot defile yourself, where you're not going to be a conduit for my divine image if you're going to do that. And that's why these restrictions are there. Let's give a look what Rashi says on this piece of the Torah. Rashi is the main commentator on the Torah. He says, do not cut yourself, do not make cuts or incisions in your flesh to mourn the dead as the Amorites do, because you're the children of God. It is appropriate for you to be dignified and handsome and not wounded with your hair torn out. So what is the meaning of all this? The meaning of all this is that when we look at Judaism, and we look for the mission, and we look for meaning, and we look for the purpose. And sometimes we say, oh, it's so difficult. There's so many do's and don'ts and everything that comes along with it. We have to recognize that this is part of who we are. That is our mission. That is why we were created. And finally, before we show you a funny video, which just brings it together, and then we'll start our Fabringen for those that want to stay. The Rebbe one year spoke about this piece of the Talmud for many months, and he spoke about the pride that we have to have. So this is the story on page 174, text 14. Rav Ashi says, Rav Ashi was the one that concluded the entire Talmud. Huna Bar Natan once told me, I was standing before the king, Yazdegerd, that's his real name, of Persia. He lived in the 5th century. He had a very good relationship with the Jews. And my belt had slipped too high. The king personally adjusted it back in place and said to me, a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. He was quoting the Torah, right? That's what's written about you. So you need to look the part. You need to have self-respect. You have to act with dignity, not to become important, but because we already are. So what do we take from all this that we have studied? That if we want to align with our personality of who we are, we need to understand that we have a mission. Without a mission, we are empty. Number 2, we have purpose. Our purpose is found in the Torah. We were created to serve God. And more than that, we actually represent God in the world as humans and as Jews with the divine soul. Now, a lot of people don't think about it. And a lot of people just try to go through life to be the best that they can. So we're going to play a little video that the JLI put together. It's not a video that's spiritually inspirational, but it is very practical, and it's a takeoff of the way life is today. So I'm going to ask you to be patient with it and watch it.
Hello, thank you for calling Life Tech Support. How may I help you find fulfillment in life today?
Yeah, hi there. Yeah, I've done all the things, checked all the boxes, so why does it feel like something's still missing?
No problem. We'll troubleshoot together. Before we dive in, could you share your screen so we could look at the settings?
Oh, sure. Sure, I could do that.
Perfect. Which boxes did you check?
Yeah, the fulfillment boxes, you know, good job, cozy home, lots of gadgets, regular vacations, restaurants, all the things that, you know, should make me feel that my life is truly full.
I see. There's more than that on a different list. That's exactly why we're here. Ready to dive in?
Well, yeah, I hope so.
Step 1. Have you synced your actions with your purpose?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, you know, I try. Actually, can you explain what you mean in less, you know, technical terms?
System shows sync incomplete. Let me clarify. This step means discovering your purpose in this world and living your life accordingly.
Well, that sounds like a lot. Now, how do I even know what my purpose is?
Not to worry, we'll break it down. Step 2, have you checked your source code?
Source code? I can barely remember my Amazon password, and to be honest, you know, I didn't even know I had a source code.
Very common. Most people skip that step. I'm talking about the divine code, the Torah, life's ultimate operating system.
I guess I really should check that out.
That's right. On to the next step. Step 3. Have you activated deeper awareness for daily tasks?
Daily tasks, like folding laundry and making coffee?
That's right. Every action, even the most mundane, can run in purpose mode. Otherwise, it's just a background app draining your spiritual energy.
So making coffee is a mitzvah?
Not exactly, but you can aim it toward a mitzvah, like staying alert for morning prayers or being an attentive husband and dad. And speaking of daily rhythm, that brings us to step 4. Is your time set to spiritual standard?
Well, my time? Well, look, I'm usually late. Does that count?
Not quite. Each day, each week, each month, each holiday, and even your birthday carries unique meaning. Open the calendar and then go to spiritual standard to turn on the day's unique energy. Once you're in sync with sacred time, the next challenge is what happens at times when you're thrown a curveball. That takes us to step 5. Have you installed the updates for unexpected events?
Oh, don't remind me. I still haven't recovered from 2020.
Yes, that was a major update. When plans go haywire, it's not a mistake. It's a system tweak for your soul's mission.
Really?
Absolutely. Look for the clues hidden in those changes.
Okay, but even if I do all that, will it work? To be honest, I'm not even sure that I matter.
That one's in your default settings. You matter. Always. No reinstall needed, not even a minor fix needed. You're good to go in that area.
What are my default settings?
Let's see. Checking imaging. You were created in the divine image, a reflection of God himself. And now checking cosmic weight. Yep, it's right there. Every one of your actions, even the smallest, carries enormous impact. Finally, checking individual ID. Yep, just as I thought, you are actually irreplaceable.
Well, thank you. I've got a lot to work on, but, you know, at least now I know where to look, where I'm going, and why.
Exactly. read the manual, the divine code, and if you ever get stuck, call back anytime. Thank you for calling Life Tech Support. Have a meaningful day.
So that was just a little funny touch on all the 6 classes that we learned, and it brings it out in the right way. To matter is a gift, to act like it is a calling. So I want to spend a few minutes now talking about, we have one other reading that we did not read yet, and that's taken from the Rebbe. If you open up to 176. Being a child of God, meaning the essence of a Jew is united with godliness, naturally brings about a state in which every part of the person is also aligned with godliness. The mind is drawn to Torah study, and the emotional character is directed towards love and awe of God. And this is what I was waiting for to explain. So, we started out the class tonight that I had some l'chaim on the table, and we started with a l'chaim to celebrate today's day. And what was the celebration of today's day? So when we speak about what we just read, that every part of the human being is one with God, I want to speak about the mind as well. A lot of people look at religion, Judaism, connection with God as an emotional thing. I feel love for God or I don't feel love for God. I have awe of God or I don't have awe of God. And people can be very passionate about it. They may study a lot of Torah, but the Torah that they're studying is mainly the how to live a life, what you're allowed to do, what you're not allowed to do, with the intricate values of that. But to explore the true depths of the divine and understand how the divine resonates with us, a lot of people are afraid to approach it. Now, it's true that starting from the early Middle Ages, it was always around in the time of the Talmud, because we see that it's mentioned at the time of the Talmud. In the time of the Talmud, people were warned not to go into that field because they wouldn't be able to handle it. And the idea of learning the deeper aspect, the intricate, esoteric part of the Torah, was something which was seen as a no-no. Only certain great individuals can study it. So we know that Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai studied it, and Rabbi Elazar studied it. In later generations, there were great Kabbalistic scholars, but most people that read it, it just sounded like the abstract. Until the coming of Rabbi Shneur Zalman of Liadi, who was a disciple of the Maggid, who was the disciple of the Baal Shem Tov. And he said, to quote a very famous ad, "A mind is a terrible thing to waste." The mind is really the king and the cockpit of the human being. And the mind has to be engaged in this level of knowledge, and then the feelings and the actions are strong. What was he trying to do? He was trying to create a people that can survive all kinds of conditions. We talked about in lesson 5, if you come across with a curveball and things don't go your way, how are you going to survive? Let's say even for Judaism in Russia, after the fall of the Tsar, and everybody was celebrating equality and there's going to be a social goodness for everybody, and the communists came to power and they outlawed Judaism, and everybody dissipated. People either ran away or they went undercover. Chabad remained strong and firm and kept the torch of Judaism, even in the face of torture, in the face of death. And they weren't afraid of anything. Where did it come from? It came all from that teaching that Rabbi Shneur Zalman of Liadi taught, and he ingrained within each and every one of us through his teachings of Tanya and the other teachings as well. And all of that was put in danger because of political reasons within the Jewish community. And you have to understand that the Alter Rebbe, Rabbi Shneur Zalman Liadi, was the leader of that movement with thousands of people that followed him. And when the Tsarist government decided to put him into jail on the charge of treason, in those despotic kind of regimes, it doesn't take much to kill someone, even if there's a slight chance that the person is a troublemaker. And especially because it came after the French Revolution, they didn't want any revolution. So the Jews were really petrified of what will happen with Rabbi Shneur Zalman of Liadi. But he walked in with confidence and he told everybody, I will emerge strong. And he came out strong. Now, I want to just add one other layer to it as well. The Alter Rebbe later revealed, after he was freed, because they saw a change in him. After he was released from prison, they saw that his teachings were much more elaborate and more frequent than what was before. And they were wondering why. So they discovered through his teaching, through his telling, that while he was in prison, he was visited by the souls of his teacher, the Maggid Ibn Rich, and his teacher, the Baal Shem Tov. And they told him that the reason why you were arrested and the reason why you were thrown in prison is not just because there was opposition for you on earth, so to speak, but even in heaven there was opposition. Now, why was there opposition? Because you were taking the most precious treasure of knowledge from God and disseminating it out to the world. And they felt that it belongs in hiding. It shouldn't be shared with anyone. So Rabbi Shneur Zalman of Liadi said, does that mean that I should stop? They said, no, on the contrary, when you will be released, it means that the edict in heaven against you is gone, and now you can go full force. Why? Because the Baal Shem Tov said that when he had met Mashiach, and he asked Mashiach, when will you come? And he said, when your well springs will come forth, burst forth to the outside. And that's what Rabbi Shneur Zalman wanted to do. He wanted to take those well springs, but it shouldn't just be emotional or passionate. It has to be something that we understand and we resonate, and it resonates with us. And since then, the Chabad Rebbe's have expounded on Chabad, on the depths of Torah, and made it so available that everyone that wants to, especially today, can study it. And that's why it's a big celebration. What does it do? It unlocks the secrets of the world and unlocks the secrets of our own being, and it gives us a sense of purpose and a sense of mission. It's not about miracle stories and it's not about voodoo. It's about understanding who we are and what makes us tick and why we have to do that. And that is the power of this day of the 19th of Kislev. And I just want to say that growing up in the Chabad community, on the day of Yutas Kislev, the night before and the day of Yutas Kislev, it was like a full holiday. We would have our teachers study and fabring with us all night the night before. So like today, this year, it fell out on a Tuesday like the first time. So Monday night, we would be up till the wee hours of the morning. And then we would have a full day celebration and learning and different kinds of activities during the day. And at night, the Rebbe would come out in my days at 8:30 in the evening and start with the dissertations. And some of the deepest concepts of Torah study were always revealed at that time on the 19th of Kislev that changed the way we think about Torah and about Hasidus. So that's why this day is very special. Everything that we learned in the JLI in the last 6 weeks is based on those teachings. And that's what we saw that was interspersed with different things about the Rebbe. So this actually gave us hope. It gave us a sense of mission. It also gave us the tools to be able to survive all kinds of changes and to be loyal to who we are. So for that, I invite anyone that wants to say L'chaim, and we have cups on that table where Rabbi Weiss is. And if you want some refreshments, it's also fine. And there's more L'chaim in the closet there. The reason to say L'chaim is because it's a joyous day. So I started with L'chaim. I will say L'chaim again. L'chaim. I just want to mention that we have another JLI coming up in January, and we have a little ad. It's called Captivating Cases in Rabbinic Responsa. A lot of practical questions that came up during the years, things that guide us even today in halacha. So hopefully you'll join us for that. Thank you all for joining us for the JLI. Those that want to stay for the Fabrengen will stay after this. L'chaim, L'chaim, L'chaim.
Thank you, Rabbi.
You want some L'chaim? This is sweet L'chaim. I just have to. This is sweet L'chaim. I got it as a gift for my birthday. It's not,
Okay, that's good.
it's a sweet tasting one. It's a liqueur. L'chaim, thank you. Amen. Reveal blessings to you too.
L'chaim, thanks, Rabbi.
Thank you very much. I will stop the recording now. Thank you all.